Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
You have a choice, whether to be a madman or a bold genius. What's the difference? A madman is somebody who does the same action over and over and over for an unknown destiny. A bold genius is somebody who does the same action over and over and over again for a known destiny. That is why fortune always favors the bold. True titans of our times and of the past, who are bent on making most of their opportunities in life, are too busy to bother with luck. Luck is the good fortune you determine for yourself. So find the strength, have the knowledge, summon up the courage to accomplish and see that your dreams are limitless. Your dreams are the fabric that binds all of us together. Rise up like fire. Ascend the ladder of your dreams. We choose to rise, not fall. We choose to live, not die. Shift to your triumph. Today, you shift to your triumph. And carry your dreams forward until your life is a capital of triumph. I believe in you, and I know you can do whatever you want. You have an unlimited potential. This moment, this second, your life is an Olympian sunrise. This is your time.
This is your time. Right here at revolutionradio.com to rise up and make the difference. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Listener supported 100%.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio, listener-supported radio, where no topic is taboo, and your support helps keep it that way. Brought to you by Revolution Radio, also listener-supported radio, where information never sleeps. Today, I'm going to be, during the first hour, talking to Chris Thomson about his book, Full Spectrum Intelligence. And pardon that wheeze, folks, I'm hearing come out of my throat. I'm sure you hear it, too. I think the moisture in the air is getting to me. But anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, before we get started with Chris, I want to mention that it's come to my attention that the audience has been growing here at Revolution Radio, and I'm really glad to hear that. It's a good sign. However, the point could also be made that when you start growing, you need more servers to handle the load, and that, of course, comes the extra expense, and this being listener-supported radio. Your donations help, and also, if you're not already a subscriber to the archives, I think it's like $5.99 a month if you want to join that. You know, every little bit helps, and you get access to all the shows of all the hosts for this $5.99 a month. And I hear that they're also been selling CDs of these shows for the people that were interested in that and splitting the proceeds with a host like myself. So please look into that one if you get a chance as well. So, Chris, how you doing today?
I'm fine, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Royce.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
It's the evening over here in Spain, so it's just after 8 o'clock where I am.
Oh, it's just after 8 o'clock, so we were right earlier, exactly 7 hours.
It's amazing. It's a strange world, isn't it?
Right. Now, you're not in Spain right now then, are you?
I am in Spain, although the people who live where I live call it Catalonia, because they're quite independence-minded. In fact, as I speak, there's a referendum coming up next month about whether to be independent. So a lot of things happening over here.
Okay. Well, I think a good way to get started here is you tell all the listeners here a little something about yourself and about how you come about wanting to write about full spectrum intelligence.
Well, I'm Scottish. I guess most people can detect that from Glasgow. I live in Spain. I came here 8 years ago. I used to be a lawyer years ago and an economist. I ended up getting very interested in, let's say, the problems of the world and their solutions. And for that, I used to work in think tanks. I worked in a think tank in Edinburgh, Scotland, and also in a think tank in Santa Fe, New Mexico. What I discovered was that we human beings are not quite as intelligent as we think we are. Will I say more?
I just didn't want to interrupt you. I didn't know there was more to come on to that one yet.
No, I mean, there's a widespread belief that we're the most intelligent species on this planet.
I'm aware of that belief. I used to be amongst the ones that thought that we were too, at least until I got a little bit older.
In a way, it's quite comical if it wasn't so tragic. In some respects, of course, we are intelligent. We have language, we can write, we can speak. We have technology. We have many things to be proud of. In other respects, I think all other species put us to shame. I cannot think of one other species apart from us that doesn't live ecologically in harmony with other species on the planet. We seem to be the strange exceptions. And this got me thinking, what is it about us, we human beings, who are, on the one hand, so intelligent, so much going for us, and on the other hand, how can I put it, stupid? And that led me eventually into exploring consciousness and I spent quite a few years just developing my own consciousness. I'll stop there in case you want to ask me some questions.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering about this here. I was not aware that you could have. There's only so many ways, aren't there, that you can develop your consciousness? I mean, there's meditation, there's yoga, there's breathing, but isn't the ways you can do that kind of more or less limited?
In my opinion, in my experience, no. I think there's some widespread misunderstandings about what consciousness is. For example, we're all conscious. All of us wake up in the morning, and that's consciousness. We are conscious in the morning. Many of us, I suppose most of us, are even conscious while asleep. If there's a sound while you're sleeping, you'll wake up because at some level you're conscious. So we're all conscious. And most of us become more conscious during our lifetimes, or at least we should do.
I think many of us do, but I don't think everybody does. Consciousness, though, isn't this really something that's really depends on definition?
Well, it's a long word. And over here in Spain, I tend to use the word awareness because most people understand what that means. It means that you're aware of what's happening around you. You're aware of what's happening in the world, for example. But equally important, you're aware of what's happening inside you. So to go back to your question, which is, are there a limited number of ways of becoming more conscious? I don't think so. I think all of us, in our own unique ways, find ways to become more conscious. In my case, I was specifically interested in a particular kind of consciousness. I was very interested in the non-physical. I should explain that.
Really? I've never heard of a physical consciousness.
Well, we're all physically conscious in the sense that we see and hear through our physical body, through our physical eyes and through our physical ears. That's what I mean by physical. And because we use our physical senses to perceive the world, all of us do that. The world we perceive is the physical world. All right, that's all I mean. So when I say non-physical, you can define that in terms of what it's not, okay? It's the world that cannot be perceived by your physical senses. That's all I mean. And I was very interested in that because I'd read a book by Rudolf Steiner when I was quite young, a short book called Knowledge of the Higher Worlds. The title may have changed, but was the title then, Rudolf Steiner.
That name sounds familiar to me.
He was the guy in Germany that set up the anthroposophical movement about 100 years ago. And the schools that are called Waldorf schools. You may have heard of those.
I have.
This short book had a big influence on me because if what Steiner said was true, it meant there was a non-physical world. It meant that most of us, perhaps nearly all of us, were simply unaware of it, except those of us that believe in spiritual things. It also meant, if what Steiner said was true, that all of us had the potential to develop, let's call them non-physical senses, which would enable us to perceive this non-physical world, okay? That sounds a bit clumsy, I know, but I hope it's clear.
Sort of like a third eye or an inner ear?
That kind of thing, but more specific. I mean, this was specifically to be able to see and experience the non-physical aspects of the world and of the universe and of the human being. It's quite confusing, Royce, because sometimes these are called spiritual aspects, okay? But while I was trying to develop this and study it, I always tried to be scientific about it, in the sense that I wanted to be clear what it was that I was looking for and what it was I was trying to develop. So a long-winded way of saying that's the kind of consciousness that interested me.
Well, did you ever, while you were doing all this here study, find out if there was a scientific way to verify or validate consciousness? Because I know that a lot of people have this under heavy debate, in other words.
It depends very much, Royce, what you mean by scientific. So Steiner was sometimes called a scientist of the invisible. What he meant by it is what I mean by it, okay? So, for example, if you were to ask me what my beliefs are, I would say they're based mainly on experience. So if I've experienced something and it's true for me because I've experienced it, then I believe it. And because I'm experiencing it for myself directly, that's my way of being scientific. It's my direct way of observing something, of observing an experience. I realize that might not chime exactly with what most people think of as science, but I think the main reason for that is science today has become science of the physical.
Definitely into the material.
Yeah, I mean, although it's not stated explicitly, I think what science is today is the study of the physical world, which is fine. It's fine. As long as scientists don't claim they're studying the whole world, I'm fine with that, okay? And the reason that science today is the study of the physical world is because what scientists use, in effect, to study the world is their physical senses of sight, hearing, touch, and so on. If that sounds a bit odd or incredible, when you think about it, it's probably true, because all scientific instruments like microscopes or weighing machines or telescopes, any scientific instrument you can think of is, in fact, an extension of one of our physical senses. So when scientists study the world, what they're studying is the world as seen through their physical senses. It's therefore no surprise that what they end up seeing is the physical world, the physical aspects of the world. And as I said earlier, I was very interested in the other aspects too.
Well, if you ask me, I'll be honest with you, Chris, I think science tends to limit itself because when it refuses to view the other knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, then it fails to be able to explain all of reality scientifically, because it's working with a part of a recipe. You couldn't give somebody a recipe on how to make sauce for spaghetti, for example, on one sheet of paper, and the recipe for how to do the noodles on the other, and just keep one of them separated and ask them to make spaghetti. They'll never get the whole entire dish put together as one dish, in other words.
I totally agree, Royce, totally agree. When I lived in Santa Fe, which was about 12 years ago, I was invited to present at a conference in Albuquerque. I'm not sure if these conferences still exist. They were called the Science and Consciousness Conferences, and they were held every year. Very interesting. And my presentation was called Science of the Whole, spelled W-H-O-L-E, which was my way of saying what would science look like if it wasn't just restricted to the physical, material aspects of the world.
Okay, now I shared your links in the chat room before the show started, but you might want to read them out loud real quick. I know you got the more than one page, so why don't you tell the audience which page you prefer them to go to?
I'm not sure what you mean. Could you explain that?
Your website link.
Just go to christhomson.org and you'll find a summary of my book, which is called Full Spectrum Intelligence.
Yeah, now you got a link to Full Spectrum Intelligence from Chris Thomson, right?
I hope so. I hope it works.
I think it did, because I think I used it, if I remember correctly. That I'm just confirming it with you, because Well, I slept since then. I'm not sure my memory's any good.
In any event, if you go to Amazon.com or any Amazon and you type in full spectrum intelligence, you'll find the book.
And while we're talking about the book, why don't you give the people a kind of an idea, without actually giving away the whole book, of what they're going to find in the book?
I said earlier that we human beings have fantastic potential, and that's pretty obvious, I think. But we don't always live up to it. In other words, we often make mistakes. We often act stupidly. If you were to make a list of the world's big problems today, all of them are caused by us. None of them caused by other species. So there's this huge kind of paradox, I think, about us, about human beings. We have this great potential to be wonderfully intelligent and do wonderful things. And of course, wonderful things do happen. That's true. At the same time, we are the ones destroying this planet. We are the ones destroying the biosphere. And I was just interested in why that's so. And essentially, the book is a course in how to be intelligent. That's all it is. What would it take to become more intelligent? To take yourself, for example, Royce, okay? Say you woke up one morning and decided that it might be an idea to become more intelligent, okay? Whatever your starting point is. You might ask yourself, how would you do that? Is there a guide? Is there a roadmap on how to be more intelligent?
A recipe.
a recipe, yeah, call it what you will, okay? And in fact, and this surprised me, I did a lot of research before this. There are very few recipes, very few roadmaps, okay? Yes, of course, there are books about intelligence, emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman, for example, social intelligence. There's plenty of stuff around about, how to behave better, how to be wiser, about personal development and growth. What I couldn't find was a comprehensive, full spectrum approach to being intelligent. And that's why I wrote the book.
So then it teaches intelligence on more than one level.
I mean, yes. I focus on 6 main kinds. Mental intelligence, which most people know about. Emotional intelligence, which is quite well known now. Social intelligence, I think that's becoming better known. Spiritual intelligence, which is difficult to define. And that's because different people have different opinions about it. Intuitive intelligence, which really interests me, which I define as knowing without knowing how you know. And physical intelligence, which is the intelligence, the kind of innate intelligence of the human body. So I tried to cover all of them. And I did it on a rather unusual basis. I assumed there was no such thing as an intelligent person. I assumed it wasn't possible to say that person's intelligent and that person's not. And it might surprise you to hear that my role model was Forrest Gump. As in the movie, played by Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I remember the movie, but I never watched it, so I don't know a lot about it.
I recommend it. It's a wonderful example of what I mean by intelligence. So, Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks, was designed to appear to be stupid because of the way he spoke, because of his haircut. The whole idea was you would think that he was stupid. And yet he met the president of the USA 3 times. He did wonderful things. And that led me to define intelligence as the way we actually behave in real life, in our daily life. It isn't about being intelligent in theory. It's about how we actually behave. So if, for example, you were to ask me if I was intelligent, the honest answer is sometimes. Sometimes. Just because I've got a couple of degrees from university and have had a lot of experience doesn't guarantee that I'm intelligent.
Well, yeah, because I've seen many people in my lifetime that were technological geniuses, academic geniuses, medical geniuses, whatever, and many of them had absolutely zero common sense, or almost zero common sense, or knew nothing about spiritual intelligence. So, it's also possible to just be, geared and intellectually one or two or maybe even three ways, but be limited into how many different ways you can do it, I think.
Another example which I use as a contrast is Adolf Eichmann. You probably know he was the German who masterminded the murder of Jews during the war. And yet, conventionally, he was an intelligent man. He was well-read. He expressed himself well. He was a good thinker. So in those terms, conventionally, he was an intelligent man. And yet, he made the world a much worse place. So my definition of intelligence is any behavior, any action, any words that make the world a better place. That's my definition. It could be very small, very local, very personal. It could be on a bigger scale. But anything at all that makes the world a better place means you're acting intelligently.
And, of course, when you're doing things that are destructive like Hitler did, you're not acting intelligently, at least in the moment.
And that's my point. My point is none of us, or at least I think none of us, are intelligent all the time. Which makes it difficult to say there are intelligent people and unintelligent people. It depends very much how you behave right now.
I think a lot of it probably goes into the fact that human beings are kind of strange people, and sometimes they're right on the ball, they're alert, and they're getting everything done. And then other times they're like walking around in a dreamland, and any intelligence they have when they're alert is just like turned off, asleep, taking a nap.
I don't know what I can say on this program, but here goes. Stop me if I cross any lines, will you?
I'll try.
No, I mean, when I was developing my consciousness in the 60s, and I've been doing it off and on since then, I woke up inside me what I call my inner senses, okay? I use the term inner senses to distinguish them from our normal physical senses, our outer senses, which see the outer world. And at first this was very scary because I was experiencing things I hadn't got a clue about. I didn't know what was happening. Eventually things settled down, but this took years. And I was able to, if you like, turn on my inner senses whenever I wanted. And I still can. But it gives me direct access to, let's call it spiritual worlds, let's call it non-physical worlds, which are very, very different indeed from the world that most of us experience every day. I mean, very different indeed. The difficult or the challenge for me throughout my life has been how to express that, how to communicate that. Because when you tell people these things, they raise their eyebrows at the very least and wonder how it's possible. The reason I'm telling you this, Royce, is for me that capacity that we have, that potential that we have to open up this spiritual consciousness inside us is immense. And it has far-reaching implications. In my view, it could be the most important part of our future. As I said, the challenge is it's not well recognized. It's barely recognized within science. And the question for me is, how does one communicate this in ways that don't turn people off, in ways that don't suggest that you're just being new agey,
Right.
and a bit airy-fairy. So it's a permanent challenge, I have to say.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I mean, in a lot of cases, it's just out and out considered not acceptable. In the one place where you would expect it to be the most accepted, oftentimes it is not, and that's in the church or religious community, because to them, when you start talking about the spiritual world, they start conjuring up demons and witches and goblins, and they don't realize you're really talking about the world inside of yourself. In other words, your inner being, your consciousness. And by the time their mind's tripped, you can't get it back, in other words.
No, it's not easy, I agree. I joined a very interesting group nearly 30 years ago. It's called the Scientific and Medical Network. I encourage you and your listeners to write that down. I'll say it again. Scientific and Medical Network. If you Google it, you'll find it very quickly.
Scientific and Medical Network.
Yeah, it is the most interesting organization I've ever been a member of. It was set up about 40 years ago by a few people, some of whom were doctors and scientists, who wanted to say things that they couldn't say in public, because if they said them in public, that would threaten their careers. You can imagine what I'm talking about. So they set this thing up. It was very small. It was very informal in its early years. There are now thousands of members, including some people that your listeners will recognize, some names that they'll recognize, all over the world. And it's, if I was to summarize what it's trying to do, this is my opinion, it's trying to take a scientific view of consciousness and spirituality. Not only that, it's trying to marry that scientific view with science itself. Okay, so it's a fascinating topic. It's a fascinating field. Not surprisingly, the organization's gone up and down. Had its difficulties. And even now, 40 years on, Royce, I mean, what these people are saying within this organization, and there are thousands of them, including many Nobel laureates, Nobel Prize winners, is still not acceptable. It's still by no means part of mainstream thinking or mainstream belief.
That's because they haven't found a way to empirically prove it scientifically. However, having said that, what you're talking about, you reminded me of Edgar Mitchell's Noetic Sciences. I think they're trying to do the same thing over there that your group is talking about.
I met Edgar's late colleague, Willis Harman. Willis died in 1997. Willis was appointed by Edgar to run an organization called the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which used to be based in Sausalito in the Bay Area. It may have moved its address, but just Google that, Institute of Noetic Sciences. Willis, unfortunately, died in 1997. In the couple of years before his death, he and I worked together on this same question. It's a long word, but the word is epistemology, okay? And epistemology is just another way of saying, what are the rules of evidence for science? In other words, what kind of evidence could be admitted to prove certain things? And that's been the real bone of contention, Royce, because scientists typically only admit physical evidence. They don't like to admit and accept other kinds of evidence.
That is very true.
Interestingly, Edgar Mitchell, as you know, went to the moon.
Right.
And And because of his experience up in space, it was that experience in space which really changed him,
Left him so awestruck that he knew there had to be more.
Yeah, and when he came back, that's why he set up this institute. Noetic, as you may know, comes from the Greek word nous, N-O-U-S, which is the Greek word for mind. So basically they're studying what the mind is. But there's much overlap between what they do and what the scientific and medical network do. So it's a very interesting field, and I do encourage your listeners to look at both of these organizations.
Right. Now, if that comes from nous, the Greek word nous, then that's not very far from the Greek word gnosis.
Gnosis, as you mean, means knowledge, okay?
Right.
Which is about knowing. If I was to find the Greek word for consciousness, that's the word I'd use, gnosis, okay? Because, as we touched upon earlier in this conversation, everyone's conscious. Consciousness is not a strange, mysterious thing. We're all conscious every day. Of course, it's true that some of us are more conscious than others. That's true. But the fact is that consciousness is perhaps the most basic part of our life. It is the most basic experience we have, to be conscious. Another way of saying being conscious is to know. So what do I mean by knowing? I'll give you an interesting example. That's Mount Everest. I know Mount Everest is the highest mountain in the world. I know it's 29,028 feet above sea level. Okay, I know that. But the question for me is, what do I mean when I say I know that? And that raises some interesting questions, because it suggests there are different ways of knowing.
There are different ways of knowing. I mean, for instance, you could go out there, climb the mountain, and measure it yourself.
Exactly.
And you know it because you did all the footwork yourself. Or you could read it in an encyclopedia and take their word for it, which people consider that knowing because somebody put it in there. But in its more technical sense, it's not knowing, because what if the guy that took the original measurements and went in the encyclopedia made a miscalculation, for example?
I agree. So, I mean, just following from what you just said, going there yourself, touching the mountain, seeing it, would be direct knowing, because it's direct experience that you have yourself, all right? The other kind I mentioned, which is, it's in a book, you see it in a movie, is indirect knowing, which means you take on trust the word of someone else who's been there. So that's indirect, okay? It's not direct. But another kind of knowing is deduced knowing, which is where you work something out for yourself, all right? Perhaps you have a problem, perhaps you are worried about something, and you spend time, thinking about it, meditating perhaps upon it. And because you think about it, you become more conscious of what it is. You know it more clearly. I call that deduced knowing. The knowing that most interests me is the kind of knowing that is least accepted or least understood as far as we're concerned, human beings. Some people call it intuition. It's a kind of direct knowing. So an example which is quite common, and many people have this, is I'm thinking of my friend who lives in the south of Spain. I haven't seen him for a while. A few seconds later, he calls me. He hasn't called me for 6 months, but he calls me a few seconds after I've been thinking about him. We speak, we say hello, and I say to him, "That's odd, I was thinking about you." And he said, "That's odd, I was thinking about you too." Okay? Now, I'm sure most of us have had an experience more or less like this, I'm sure.
Like when you walk in a room of people and they're talking about somebody they all know, and the phone rings and the person who answers says, "Oh, funny you should call. We were just now talking about you."
So the question for me is, let's accept these things happen, okay? That's a given. What I was interested in trying to discover is, can we improve on that? We seem to have the talent for doing it. It seems to be innate. It seems to be there as part of us.
Like, can you cause it to happen at will?
Yes. So in one of the chapters in my book is called Simply Knowing. It's a chapter about intuitive intelligence. So I describe the ways in which I honed that ability to the point where I know things at a distance, and I know what's happening with people I love or people I know. I can tune in at will. That's what I'm saying.
Didn't the ancients used to have a means of doing this, like the ancient Hindus or something like that, of tuning into this kind of knowing and always knowing this kind of stuff?
The short answer, Royce, is yes. And I think you'll agree with me that although we have benefited in many ways from materialism, from the Industrial Revolution, from technology, I'm the first to admit that, okay? Many benefits. People live longer, they're healthier, their living standards are better. I'm not saying there aren't problems, but I'm saying in general, we've benefited. At the same time, I think there was a price
to pay.
And I don't want to oversimplify, but I think in general, the price we paid is that we lost something by becoming more and more focused on the material aspects of life and the material benefits in life. We tended to sideline and marginalize the spiritual aspects of our life. So I'm sure that in the past, and even today in some indigenous cultures, people had capacities to know and to be conscious that we've lost. I'm sure that's true. A good example is in Australia. The Aborigines are remarkable. I don't know whether you know this, but they can be anywhere, literally anywhere, in a city or in the country. And if a loved one dies, even if that person's 1,000 miles away, they know it immediately. This is well recorded, so there's no doubt it's true. The question you and I would ask, and your listeners would ask too, is how is it true? What's the mechanism? What happens? So I think what you and I are probably hinting at is there was a time in the past where our consciousness was very different, and we could do things with our consciousness that we can't do now. And I think if I have a mission in life, I'm not sure if I do, but if I have a mission in life, it's to try and restore some of that, and to try and make it happen within the context of the modern world. So we don't have to regress. We don't have to go back and lose the benefits of the modern world, but we can bring forward the things we used to have. And I think we can marry together spirit and matter in a very useful, integrated way.
Well, it wasn't too long ago, within the last year or two, or maybe a little more, that I heard in the news that they have actually learned that two particles can be thousands of miles apart and still know what the other one is doing, or what they're both doing. They kind of like got an instantaneous information thing going on between them there. And I think this is like coming close to scientific proof of what you were just describing, although it's not exactly formulated proof yet. It kind of like links the two together, I think.
It's in my book. It's called non-locality. Non-locality. And it was first really explored by an American called John Bell working in Switzerland. And what he found, and I'm simplifying it, but what I'm saying is true. What he found is when two subatomic particles interact, they never lose their relationship, even if they are 1 million miles apart. It doesn't matter what the distance is. And this has been proved experimentally using space vehicles. This has been proved repeated 50 years. Just to say more about that, the connection between these two particles is instantaneous. It doesn't matter how far apart they are. The speed of light doesn't apply. And the lesson I take from that is, if this applies to particles, why shouldn't it apply to everything, including us?
Exactly. Are we not made up of these same particles?
Exactly. We're made of particles, are we not? And I'm sure the particles we're made of interact, and that they interact with the particles of other people. So I don't want to labor the point or say this is scientific proof. All I'm saying is that scientists, physicists, have known for half a century about this kind of thing, about total connectedness, about the way the strange ways that things connect.
They haven't been able to explain it, but they're aware that it's there.
There's half an explanation. There was a guy called Mach, M-A-C-H. He was famous because of the speed of sound. You've probably heard of that. Mach 1.
Right.
Okay, his name is Ernest Mach. What he's less famous for is a principle. And I do recommend that your readers, your listeners, explore this, Mach's principle. It's a bit technical, but the essence of it is this, that everything in the universe exists only because everything else exists. I'll repeat that. Everything in the universe, including you and me, exists only because everything else exists. Should I elaborate?
I'm just trying to figure out what role death plays in that, because once people die, they no longer exist, yet everything else continues to go on.
I'm sure death isn't what we imagine it to be. I mean, of course, the physical body dies. Of course it does. Sometimes it gets buried, sometimes cremated. So no question about that. All right? But I don't think we are physical bodies.
No, I tend to agree with you on that. And that's what I'm thinking is perhaps what that statement means is for things to exist, all of our consciousness has to exist, or our awareness.
One of the challenges I had years ago when I was exploring my consciousness, the non-physical, was finding a vocabulary, finding a grammar, finding words, because there were no words in the English language for what I was experiencing. And I include colors, I include sounds, which weren't really sounds because my ears couldn't hear them, but they were the analogues of sound, if you know what I mean. So when I say that the physical body dies, but we don't die, perhaps I should try and explain myself. When you become more conscious, when you experience the non-physical, one of the first things you notice is that everything is connected. And when you see other people, you don't see the physical body. You don't see what you normally see. What you see is a kind of lot of movement of color and shapes, all interpenetrating each other. Everything's moving. Nothing is static. Everything's beautiful. Everything's connected. So even though you're in Houston and I'm in Catalonia, near Barcelona, you and I are connected in ways that science just hasn't even begun to explore. And if I was to try and define the human soul, I would say it's that bit of us that's connected to everything else. And it's that doesn't die. That continues.
And this is the main part of the full spectrum knowledge that you're maybe hoping that will catch on?
Yes, and so, the book tries to answer a question. Why are we not behaving as intelligently as we could be? That's the question I try to answer, okay? And perhaps there's no comprehensive answer to that question. I don't know. But in trying to answer it, I look at human intelligence and I offer my experience of what it might take to become more intelligent right across the spectrum. Not just mentally or emotionally, but the whole spectrum. So that's my modest offering, you might say.
Okay. Well, listen, I show that we got a couple minutes left, real quick like. Is there anything you want to share that I haven't thought to ask you about yet?
No, I just think the world's changing. You probably think that too. We have Ebola over here in Spain. People are a bit anxious about that. There's Islamic, all kinds of stuff happening in the Middle East, as you know. People are talking about climate change. Royce, all kinds of things are happening in the world. As it happened, there was a very lovely full moon last night. And I got up very early just to look at it. And it's strange, but yes, of course. The world today is full of problems. That's clear. But looking at the moon last night, I felt very, very optimistic. I think we'll get through this. It won't be easy. There'll be a few tears, a few bumps and knocks. It won't be easy. But I think we'll do it. I think we'll get there.
Yeah, there are groups out there that are making changes. I see posts from them on Facebook every day. People are starting to make I guess you could call it a kind of a passive-aggressive type of stand against the powers that be, and they're trying to, scream out for justice in acceptable ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. Much as I love America, your country, which is a wonderful country, you're probably the first to agree with me that it's a land of great contrasts. Poverty, great wealth, great beauty, some ugliness. A
regular melting pot.
Indeed. I believe that Texas may go Spanish one day.
Oh, my wife, I'd never hear the end of it.
When I lived in Santa Fe, about 45% of the population spoke Spanish every day. So
I don't know if I could learn a new language or not myself. I've never tried.
That's because you're American, my friend.
It could be. I think I'm a lazy American, just don't want to mess with learning.
I'll end with a joke, but it's a true story. The English, when they went abroad on holiday a century ago, couldn't speak foreign languages. So their way of making themselves understood was to shout. They believed that by shouting, they'd be understood.
Was that true? They really did believe that?
Yeah, they used to shout. I mean, they used to go to France, and they couldn't speak French. The French couldn't speak English. So the English just shouted at them, hoping that by shouting, they'd get the message across.
Of course, it never worked, so it didn't help.
The French weren't very pleased.
Okay. And once again, you can learn a little bit more about him at www.christhomson.com, and he's got his other website,
.org.
Oh, I'm sorry, .org. My apologies. And www.fullspectrumintelligence, is that .com or .org?
The full spectrum part is a kind of subset of me.
Okay. I wanted to double check that because it's just so common to say .com because it seems like the vast majority of everybody's website is .com, that you just keep it rolling off your tongue even when you don't mean to. And I can tell by the music that they're interrupting us saying go to break. And folks, we'll be back in just a few minutes with Gloria Taylor Brown talking about gathering of priestesses. Y'all stay tuned. And you have a good one, Chris. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Royce. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
Why am I here?
You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here.
You haven't answered my question.
The Matrix is older than you know, as you are undoubtedly gathering. The anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation.
Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lassonde.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Hey folks, Captain Nighthawk here. Do you have a favorite host? Well, imagine if you will having all the broadcast shows from 2013 to listen to anytime you want. Awesome deal, huh? Anyway, so stop by freedomslips.com and order the entire 2013 library of your favorite host for just $30. Not only do you help with the station funding to keep us on the air, you also help the host because they get half of the net on every order. Also, we have Revolution Radio's all-time favorite shows all on one disc. The details are really broad, so you'll have to visit the website and go look at the details yourself. It's, again, www.freedomslips.com/season2013.htm. And get your favorites. First come, first serve, 7 to 21 days for delivery. Thank you. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps, including me. Later.
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all!
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia. at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
He wants a challenge.